Everyone, I'm excited to welcome you to ZaranTech's Expert Workday Recruiting Training. In this comprehensive course, you'll master Workday's powerful cloud-based recruiting software to streamline and optimize your entire hiring process. We'll guide you through configuring Workday recruiting for your unique HR workflows, posting jobs, sourcing candidates, moving top applicants through the hiring stages, and extending job offers. You'll learn how to track and analyze critical recruiting metrics to spot areas for improvement. With ZaranTech's real-world Workday recruiting expertise, you'll standardize your recruiting practices company-wide, engage hiring managers through self-service, and attract and onboard top talent more efficiently. Join the leaders in Workday Recruiting Training and take your hiring capabilities to the next level. But before we begin, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to receive regular updates from us. Now let us take a look at the agenda. Recruiting foundation, staffing models, job requisition compensation, evergreen requisitions, job profiles, external facing fields. Let's dive into the video now.
Presentation, it talks about Workday recruiting and things you need to do to prep for it. So, in the last session, we saw different decisions that needed to be made and how to configure by going into the tenant setup. And we had to either make a particular choice within the edit tenant system or edit recruiting or edit HCM. And we made different decisions. So this one particular presentation, this is actually by Workday. It talks about the different considerations that companies should go through for preparing for Workday. So, and the reason I want to go through this with you guys is so that given that this module is very huge, this document, or what we'll go through, I'll give you all of the talking points that you need to consider as part of the new implementation, or things that you need to be aware of, these are the decisions that have been made if you're supporting an implementation that's already done. But these are the key things that you need to ask for, what were the decisions made in these particular areas. So from that perspective, while it's not actually going into the system, but I think it's good awareness of things we need to be aware of for recruiting implementation. Okay. So this particular slide, it talks about staffing models, and recruiting could use both position management and job management, but the company needs to decide which one they're going to go with. I'll talk about the pros and cons of each. So if you need to do a lot of hiring and you need to do a lot of fast hiring, like in a retail environment where there's a lot of turnover, you should use job management. Also, if you're an agile company, like in a Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of flexibility and you do not need a lot of control, then you should be using job management. If the company wants to have a very controlled process where you have an approval flow and you could only hire within certain cost centers, certain orgs, and you need a department head to approve each time before you create a position or you hire someone, in that case, you should use position management. The step to hire someone is longer when you use position management, and it's also a little bit more cumbersome. Like every time you do a promotion or you do a termination, you have to deal with what are you going to do with that position that will be left behind in case of a termination or a transfer. So if the company wants to be nimble and fast as far as this hiring process, then they should be using job management and not position management. The position, yeah, we will talk about how to create a position because that's part of the, is part of creating the requisition. Position, like when you create a position within Workday, it's actually, is VP position, is create position. And the end product of that is that you have what's called a position, and then you could hire against that position. If you don't have position management, then you just go to the organization and then you just say, hey, hire someone. We don't need a position with job management. We just go to the, like we're gonna say, for example, we have an organization called Andrew's organization. We just go to that organization and then we just click on hire, and then you could create the hire record. But if you're using position management, you cannot just hire. You need to have a position before you could hire. Job requisitions are required for Workday recruiting. So the things we want to consider is, do you want to require job requisitions for organizations using position management, or do you want to require job requisitions based on specific rules? Or do you want to use job requisitions for organizations using job management? And then also the numbering scheme. Typically companies just start with R and some sequence that starts with something. So this is, we saw yesterday where you set this up within the Workday application. And we also saw the ability to override the hiring restrictions. Whether or not a company is going to have job requisition compensation as part of it. So there's a step within the process in which you could allow the recruiter or someone to enter the salary, the proposed salary, I should say. So that is a decision point, because that page where you enter the compensation is optional. You could add it or not based on that decision. And if the company decides not to, they could easily change it going forward in the future. So this is about the compensation page, whether it should be added or not. No, so there is a page. The page is called like request comp, and on that one is you enter what, you have the salary range, and you also have, if there's going to be any kind of like bonus or something. So that page, it needs to be made part of the requisition process if you do want it that way. Which there's something called Evergreen requisitions. So if companies that are doing a lot of hiring, like retail, they might enable this Evergreen requisitions. These are basically, they're not tied to any particular position, but you create this requisition so you could just have candidates against it. And you could move the candidate to job requisitions and back to Evergreen if necessary. So you collect all the candidates against your Evergreen requisition. So the reason it's called Evergreen, right? Like this is green always, like this is open always. So candidates could apply to it. And then you take the candidate from your Evergreen requisition and then you attach it to your actual job requisition. So you don't have to keep on opening up a new rec every time you need to collect more resumes, especially in a fast hiring environment. Yeah, this is part of a functionality just called Evergreen, and you have to use it for high volume, high turnover, or highly specialized jobs. If you have a candidate against the Evergreen, you cannot make an offer or hire from an Evergreen requisition. So you have to move them to a regular job requisition. Another big point is job profile data, such as job description and qualifications, should they be automatically pre-populated on the job requisition? So that means, like, if you have a particular job profile called business analyst, there should be some kind of description of what is a business analyst, and then you would consider, like, if you want to default in that job description on the job requisition. So in order to do that, the company should have job descriptions and summaries so that when they create the job requisition, it will default in. If they don't have that, then the recruiter has to enter the description or the summary at the time of creating the requisition. Yeah, within recruiting, you don't have to create the job profile because this should be actually just part of the HCM process, that there are job profiles. But if a company is using recruiting, they need to decide if they're going to pre-populate the job description and the qualifications for each job profile so that it would pre-populate on the requisition. So this shows that you have a particular job profile, for example, administrative, and it has a job family, that's linked to that job profile. And then there is a tab called job classifications, and there's also a job profile summary, description, and additional description. So if you enter information here on the job profile, then it will default into the requisition. If there is no information here, then it won't. You would select when you create a position, you have to select the job profile, and then based on that job profile, you will have to populate the description and the qualifications.
Right.
So this is saying that if you already have this information on the job profile, so this is within the HCM system, you could look up an employee, and then on their job page, you will see their job profile and the job code. And then from there, you could dig, that would be an active hyperlink. And you could from that page, you could go into the job profile data. You can see all of the data on that for that job profile. So navigate from the employee, job, and then into the job details. That's one way. You could also search for job profile as a report. And I'm sure there's some report already called job profiles. And there are certain fields which you could change the label. And in order to show to the external candidates, you want to make a little bit of a more user-friendly label. So for example, you might have location, and the location might make sense to an employee, but that location name may not make sense to an external person. So you could change the label of the location so they're more user-friendly. And also certain terms, there's something called maintain labels. So you could change what Workday calls it, and you could give it a more user-friendly label. And that's what that label will show up to the external workers. One thing to make sure is that some labels, if you change them in one place, they will not only change for the external, but they will change for everywhere else globally. Even, so other people who are using Workday, they need to be aware that you're making a change to the label. So here's an example, like you may have a location name called building 123, which may make sense to an internal employee, but candidates, for them, on that location field, you could change it to something that's more descriptive. So this shows that on the create location, on that same page, at the bottom, it says default job posting location. So you have location, and then you have job posting location. It is the same location, but whatever name that's given in the job posting location is what will show up on the external requisitions or external job posting. So a company needs to decide to go ahead and update all of their locations with more candidate-friendly labels. In this example, it's saying that on a worker summary, when an internal candidate applies, it makes sense to allow the employee to have what's called a upload by default. This widget called My Experience or Education or Job History. This may not be available on this employee profile. By default, a lot of companies don't have these areas, education or job history or a way to upload their resume. But if they're going to be using recruiting, or if they are using recruiting, it makes sense to enable these sections as well. So that's what this is talking about, that. So that when the employee applies for the job, this is the information that gets pulled into that profile. So if there's nothing here, then it's not going to pull anything. And then there's something called questionnaires. And you can have a separate questionnaire for external candidates versus internal. And these are questions that are designed to ask the candidate some particular questions to see if they're really qualified for that job. And based on what they answer, they could be disqualified. So he's saying that you should prepare some questionnaires if they're going to use them or they're not going to use them, but this is something, there's functionality to be implemented. And it could have up to 25 questions per questionnaire. I think that would be a little too much. The Workday Recruiting, it has that dynamic job application process. So you want to make sure that you consider all of the different steps and the flow, and make sure you know who are all the stakeholders in that process, so you could build them into the process flow. So we'll look at that in a little bit. But this is a screenshot of the, that dynamic job requisition business flow, and it's giving an example of where you could actually have steps that someone could review and make edits. So like in this one, there's a step for the recruiter to review the job requisition. And there's a step called request requisition compensation if they're going to utilize comp. And if there's also assigned roles. So when you're creating a requisition, there, if you want to have a step to indicate who will be the recruiter and who will be the recruiting administrator. So that's another step. We will see that when we're creating a requisition, it will ask us to assign roles. And then there's a job posting step where you indicate for this requisition where it's going to be posted to. Similarly, this one is the job requisition one. There's a closed job requisition business process with certain criteria that needs to be thought out of how the workflow is going to be. Then it talks about things to consider. Workday allows you to make an external career site. You could have more than one. Typically, companies have one Workday hosted external site and one internal website. But both of these websites will be hosted by Workday, and you'll have the link within Workday. But you could definitely configure that career site with your own logo and colors and branding, and put videos on it, have analytics running on it. So here's an example of the template for the external career site. You could put a logo. This could also be a video now. This is a new functionality. I think it just came out in the last, not this release, but the release before. You could have a video running or a banner, and this search criteria that should show up on the left-hand side, and a login page and a language selection. So things you could do on that, you could have your own banners, logo, analytics, if you need any terms and conditions, like a cookie policy message. Do you want to force the candidate to create an account, or you want to keep that as an optional step? So those are all the things to consider when creating an external site. And then obviously there's also the About Us message, resume parsing message, and country-specific terms and conditions. This is also optional to have a candidate home. It could be an optional where they could create an account after someone submits an application, or you could force the candidate to create an account first and then log in and then apply. So it's a lot of flexibility in that. So this is what the candidate home looks like. So once they create an account, then they will have a welcome page, and then they will also have any of their pending tasks or the jobs they have applied for and the next steps. So this would be kind of a landing page for the candidate. So it's really helpful. So and you get to select which statuses you're going to show to the candidate, and then you can have your own label. So internally, you might have different statuses, but you could map all of these to in progress. Like if you don't want to tell them that this is under review or screening or interview, you could do a mapping, so something more user-friendly. So out of the box, it's not going to allow you to submit from like Dice directly into Workday, right? There has to be some kind of integration set up for it. And that integration, as you're bringing in that data, it will need to create some kind of a authentication ID as part of that. And then for agency setup, things that you could allow their agency to do. So I'll go ahead and just post this on the LMS so we can move on. And we talked about some of the security roles. There's a primary recruiter, secondary recruiter. And then as far as cutover strategy, like if your company is using an ATS currently, and then they're going to go to Workday, Workday recommends that you do a clean break. Instead of trying to import all of the data, you kind of sunset one application and then do a clean start with Workday. So there's some data that you may want to bring into Workday, but they would prefer it to be, try to bring in the least data as possible, because it will add time and cost to the project. So here's what they recommend that what should be converted over. Like if they have like open recs and positions, that can be converted as part of the data conversion and brought into the new system. The candidate information, so like their name, address, contact info, skills and experience. So you could definitely bring it over, but the consulting company will actually charge a lot more for that. And then here's a list of things that they don't recommend to bring over, like their disposition history, notes, communication history, interview, like previous assessment or interview data, and then basically kind of going through what things to consider for the data conversion and the data migration strategy. So you guys can read that on your own. There's definitely local and global rules that you could implement. As far as integrations, whether it's going to have a background check and assessment or job boards by out of the box, even though there is a background check status, it really doesn't do anything unless you actually build a integration with the background check vendor. And then also any intranet or internet websites that you need to post your jobs to. And then finally, the whole change management and training to get people excited about the new features, etc. And then it's got some links on the community for those of you guys who have access to it. So I think this is a good resource. I'll post it on LMS. This is from Workday, but I think it's good to review and good stuff to talk about during the interview process. Okay, so yesterday, we talked about some of the setups. Today, I'm going to talk about what's called the Recruiting Hub. This is a major improvement that was launched only last year. So even if a company is on recruiting, if they didn't have time for it, they're probably not using the Recruiting Hub. Because you could definitely use recruiting without the Recruiting Hub. It does take a little bit of setup, but not a lot. But it is something that's very useful. So what Recruiting Hub is that if you're a recruiter or a manager, then you see this dashboard. It's like one place with all of your action items and all of your recruiting data. So let me make this one a little bit bigger. And you have this left-hand panel, and then you have this pipeline, and you have these what's called cards that you could move around. So let me give you a demo of that within the system, and then we'll talk about how to configure it.
So is it like a dashboard or something, or a worklet?
So this is called a recruiting hub. This means like it's like one place with all of this data. Prior to this, so this was introduced in, I believe, March or April of last year.
Okay.
Prior to this, you had a recruiting worklet. So either you had to use the reports to get the candidates, but there was no one place. And then you had to go to, the recruiter had to go to their inbox to find all of the items they had to do. But you know, if you've seen the Workday inbox,
right,
if you have like 30 or 40 items in there, it's very hard to sort and filter and search.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult for recruiters to use because they have to deal with like, you know, hundreds of candidates. So it's hard to find their items in the inbox.
Yeah.
So this was a huge improvement. So let me go into the system as a recruiter, and we'll see a demo of that. I'm just gonna go through it based on this screenshot. On the Recruiting Hub, you'll see different areas at the bottom. These are called cards. So there's an offer card, referral cards. So this is basically all the items that are in the inbox that are related to offer. They will be shown. They will show up on the offer card. And the items that are on, you know, this is basically it categorizes the items that are in the inbox by certain, you know, task categories, and that way it's easy to find who you need to act on. And you could actually, the end user, they could move these, how they want to line up the cards. They could add additional cards to it, or they could remove cards from it as well. And it's the end user configuration. It's not letting me go into the recruiting. It's not into the remote desktop. So let me try one more thing. Okay, I'm gonna log into the Workday's GMS. So at least we'll be able to go through the security. The domain that controls the security for this is called recruiting. And then from there, we go to the Recruiting Hub security policy. So domain is the overall area, and business process security is the security for that transaction or for that workflow. So domain could be human resources, like who have access to personal data, but that doesn't determine who could initiate an address change. So the actual, when you're thinking of business process, think about the actual transaction, like who could do that transaction and who will approve that transaction. And the domain is who has access to the data within that function. I mean, there's going to be exceptions to it, but if they want to be able to just do the transaction, they will need business process security. But they will not be able to see the data if they don't have domain access to it. So it will be, while it's technically possible, but not really. Like, if you don't have access to the compensation domain, meaning you don't have access to people's salary, how can you do a job change? Right? Those fields will not show up, even though you have access to do the transaction. It depends how big the company is, right? Like if it's a smaller company, the same person might be doing the security and other things. If it's a very large company, you might have different like teams who do different things. No, I think you always need a role or a group, whether it's going to be domain policy or or a business process security. Okay, so we're going to go into the security domain for the recruiting hub because that is new functionality. It may not be set up yet. So you have to go into one way for me to remember this task name. I just call it domain fun area. So if you just think domain fun area, then the actual task name shows up, domain security policy for functional area. So, but just think of it as domain fun area, then it will show up. And then we're going to choose the recruiting functional area. Okay, so now I finally logged into the remote desktop. Let me just try here. Domain fund area. So here's the domain. There's a description of the whole domain, and these are all the subdomains within that. And the one we're interested in right now is the recruiting hub. So I'm going to try to find that. Okay, so here's the recruiting hub. Okay. And so in this case, since it's already active, someone has already, added in the security groups. But if it was not active, first you have to click here and you have to activate the domain. So right now it's already active, so the only choice is disable. If it was not active, then there will be a choice of activating it. You would need to activate it, and then you would edit the permissions, and you would add in the groups that will have access to it. So we see that the recruiter unconstrained group and manager unconstrained group has access to it. Some companies issue they face is that this domain is only available to the unconstrained groups. So if you have HR admin or you have a recruiting administrator, which is a user-based group, they will not have access to the recruiter hub. And that's very frustrating for them because they want the administrator to have access to it, but unfortunately that's Workday constraint that they have built this domain only for the unconstrained groups and only recruiter and manager. So the recruiting assistant or the HR admin, they don't have access to that recruiting hub. But this is where you go to set it up for, at least for the recruiter and the manager. So this left-hand bar right here, this gives you access to the recruiting hub. And you could expand it by clicking on this arrow. So then it opens up and you have direct access to all of your recruiting activities. And you have this announcement and then the pipeline and the different cards. And this is built for, there's some default setup, that you could specify what are the default cards, but the end user has the power to move them. So you click here, and then you have a choice, move or remove. So you click on move, and then you could just move that card to a different location. You could also remove it, and I believe there's like 9 different cards. So once again, this is surfacing everything that's in your inbox, but it's on these cards so that it's easy to get to. So I'm not going to remove it. Let me just unclick out of that. And if I want to add a new card, you have to do it from here. There's this tiny link called Add Card. Okay, so in this case, I already have 10 cards. So let me remove a card and then I could add it. So I'm going to remove background check. Now I could add employment agreement task. So once an end user modifies this, the default setting is gone. You cannot go back to the default setting. And then you have this candidate list as well, which sorts them by their stage or any of the other columns that you want to. And this functionality called mass move, like you could select all of them and move them to a different stage. This functionality is also new. This was also rolled out in March of last year, so it's not even been 1 year since this functionality. But it's very helpful. Before that, you had to do one by one or by a particular org. And so this is called mass move. We saw how to move the cards. And then these are the shortcuts. So the shortcuts that you want to apply over here, this is also, there's a domain, and there's also a widget that allows you to select what the shortcut is going to be that you want to display over here for the recruiters. So just like we saw the domain for Recruiting Hub, there was also domains for all of these areas and where you actually maintain the setup. And this is still loading, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. So we talked about moving, removing, or adding new cards to it. This feature is role-based for recruiters only, not user-based groups. Okay, here's a screenshot of the domain. Okay, and then just like we saw the Recruiting Hub security policy, there's another one that you should be aware of. It's called Candidates for My Jobs. So if you give recruiter or admin access to that policy, then they will have access to the candidate menu item, the candidate cards, and the pipeline card. There's also the setup, tenant setup general, and this is the access that they will get if you add that role to the security policy. So it's good to be aware of. And then a couple of tasks as the Workday HRIS person or support person you should be aware of. So there's the configure default shortcuts, and then there's like the maintain hub where you could configure the announcements and such. So just a couple of tasks and domain policies. And this is just one little area, and there's like, we spent almost like an hour on it. So I do want to show a little bit of the onboarding. I'm going to kind of skip ahead to onboarding because one of our students really wants to see that. So I'm going to kind of change gears and show the onboarding business process. and then we'll call it a day after that. So first of all, the business process has to be enabled in the system. That is a implementation level task, so we're not going to get into that. But that VP must be active, and if it is active, you could easily modify it. And the name of that is just onboarding. And if a company has made a copy of it, it might be onboarding for, Cisco, or onboarding for, whatever. You could also have separate onboarding process for each organization or even a cost center. So that's why we see so many different versions of it. Typically, it just makes sense to have like 1 or 2 versions of it based on the country. Or even you could even just have one and then put in the conditional rules so that you only go to the steps based on the country requirements. So I'm looking for the onboarding default definition from here. Okay. So this business process controls what the pre-hire sees when they have accepted the offer. So once they have accepted the offer, now they're a pre-hire, and they could come into Workday and they could do these tasks that are listed here. But as part of the business process, if you want to see who could initiate this, the initiating groups will be listed here, and there should be a pre-hire or employee as self should be listed here somewhere. In the real world, you will have not just the HR partner, but you will actually have the employee or the pre-hire. So there should be another group here called pre-hire, and then you should also have an employee as self as the initiating as part of the group. And the steps that are available to them, let me make this bigger. You need some user to kick it off. But once it's kicked off, then based on the type of person, like whether it's a contingent worker or employee, they will get a task. All of them will get it, if it's a contingent worker or employee, they will get a task to enter their personal information. And then they will enter their contact information. And there's also the complete I-9. This is an action. So if a company chooses to do I-9 through Workday, all they have to do is add this step within the onboarding business process. And then Workday has a built-in condition that this step will only trigger to employees, not contractors. And then it would only trigger if the primary job is located in the US and the person is not a rehire. So there's really no additional thing you have to do. If you have this step within the business process, then when the employee gets to this step, they see the I-9, the electronic online version of the I-9 form, and they fill that out, and then they submit it. And which the, like the immigration person has to do, they have to like visually check the passport or driver's license. But as far as the entering the information is, as long as you have the security set up to view the form, there's no additional things that you need to do. The I-9 is a delivered functionality. The I-9 page is already, the electronic version of I-9 is already there. And then after that, there have the change benefit elections and so on. So if you look at some of the other onboarding processes, they don't have the I-9 in it. So I think I got disconnected from the remote server because it's not responding. What I was going to show was you go into the business process, and from the related actions, those 3 dots, you click on them, and then you could edit the business process, and then you could click on the plus button and add the I-9 step, or if you choose not to do the I-9 through Workday, you could just click on the minus and remove the step. I think we could demo it. We just need to create a new hire and then bring them up to the onboarding steps. So maybe in some of the, for the business processes, like the workflows, the task is you actually have to go to the BP, and under the related actions, there is a business process security configuration. So the security for the BP is actually on the BP itself, underneath the related actions. So you modify it by navigating to the BP itself. I will go ahead and stop the class right now. I'll upload this page on the LMS, but I do want you guys to go to the remote server, and maybe you guys will have better luck than I am because it keeps disconnecting today.
Yeah.
But I do want you guys to do one thing, is to go to the questionnaires and requisition tab of this and create a question. Just create, just using this menu name. It's here. You could type create question, edit question, delete question, and then you could group those questions into a questionnaire. You could also just view a questionnaire, and you could also see that there has been questionnaires that are attached to a requisition. So at least create some question, view the existing one, and then create a job requisition. So the task name is create job requisition, which I show on the screenshot. And just go through the steps. Put in any information that makes sense, like post internally, externally, and just go through all of the steps. And the last step is going to be post job. I think there's one more step in there called assign roles, but at least create a job requisition before we meet next time.
All right, let's test your knowledge. Here's a question for you. What section of Workday Recruiting allows you to post new job requisitions? Option A, talent pool. Option B, recruiting. Option C, careers. Option D, profile. Take a moment to think, and when you're ready, choose the correct option. Remember, each choice holds a key to unlocking the answer. Good luck. Type the correct answer in the comment section. Hello everyone. I'm excited to tell you about ZaranTech's premier training program for Workday recruiting. As more companies adopt Workday for their HR needs, talent acquisition teams must leverage the platform's robust recruiting features. Over the past 3 years, ZaranTech has helped hundreds of recruiting professionals skill up on Workday recruiting through instructor-led and self-paced courses. Many alumni rave about finally grasping Workday's applicant tracking, job requisition creation, interview scheduling, and offer management capabilities after taking the training. In just 4 weeks with ZaranTech, you'll learn end-to-end recruiting workflows in Workday, including configuring job profiles, posting openings, moving candidates through hiring stages, and producing insightful reports. This can help you or your team work more efficiently, demonstrate value to hiring managers, and earn promotions. Multiple global enterprises have chosen ZaranTech's Workday Recruiting Training for upskilling their talent acquisition staff. As more companies transition to Workday, now is the perfect time to enroll and gain an advantage. Visit ZaranTech's website below for full details on the training curriculum and formats. This is a worthwhile investment as you advance your Workday recruiting expertise.
Today, I'm just going to do a brief, overall functionality of recruiting module. Recruiting module itself is huge. It's basically a system by itself. So there's no way we could cover everything about it within the 7 or 8 hours that we have in it. So I'm going to try to focus on the key areas. There is whole applications that are designed for applicant tracking system, and Workday's recruiting module is more than just a ATS or applicant tracking system. There's a planning portion in it, there's sourcing, and then there's contact management, and then there's onboarding. So I'm just copying this graphic from the Workday community. So it's got all of these things, and it's basically a whole application, just like HCM is an application for employee management. Recruiting is Workday Recruiting is an application for everything from prospect profiles to sourcing, and then planning via requisitions, and then onboarding. So no one will believe you if you say, hey, I did recruiting module and I took care of the security and I took care of the integrations as a single person, because it's just recruiting is just so intensive in terms of how much work there is. So it's usually while in comparison, for example, for benefit administration, it gets busy only during just before the open enrollment setups, and so someone could do it part-time, right? Like, you're going to take care of the HCM system, or you might be taking care of a couple of different things, and then when it's time for open enrollment, you work on those tasks along with taking care of the HCM system and any other Workday issues. But I think from my experience and talking to other people also in recruiting, you really need someone who's dedicated to this module to support it. You cannot have someone supporting HCM and supporting security, and then at the same time doing recruiting module. It really needs a dedicated person. So no one person is not going to be expected to have all of the knowledge that's required to support recruiting. It's just really huge module, and we'll touch on some of the key points. When we talk about planning, right? So hiring manager and the recruiter and the finance budgetary team, they will get together and they will plan what requisitions they need, for the coming quarter or for the coming year.
Okay. Right.
And that would be part of the workforce planning. And based on that conversation, the recruiter or the hiring manager, they will create a requisition. So requisition means a request. We're talking about job requisitions. So a request for a job. So that will go through an approval. The request is linked to one or more positions, and then it will go through an approval process. And once it's approved, then the recruiting team or the talent acquisition team, then they will start sourcing the candidates. Yeah, so you have to select how you want to post it, right? So there will be, you could post it internally, and you could post it externally. You could default in certain places where you could post it. That's the role of sourcing, is to, once it's posted, then the talent acquisition team, they will go ahead and search for candidates who apply to that, or they could go, they could look for candidates, internal or external, who may not be linked to the requisition at all. They might just free source them, and then they'll mark them as prospects. And then when someone is marked as a prospect, then recruiting also has what's called a candidate relationship management, CRM. This is basically handling the communication that needs to happen between the recruiting team and the candidate, and also with the hiring manager. So onboarding, it kind of is part of HCM, or you could say it's part of recruiting. I will cover this because it's a critical piece. What it means by onboarding is, once the offer is accepted, then the candidate is now a pre-hire, right? So as part of pre-hire, they're ready to onboard, and they're ready to come into the HCM part, and they need to enter their, for example, in the United States, they will need to enter their onboarding information, which means they will enter their I-9 information, their legally, whatever legal paperwork they need to submit. That step is within onboarding. So I-9 verification happens within onboarding. And even any setups, for example, IT needs to know if this person prefers a Mac laptop or IBM compatible. Those kind of questions will be set up in the onboarding step. So onboarding is a business process.
Okay.
And then you basically have the hire step combined with the onboarding step. And once you kick off the hire step, then the onboarding step kicks off, and it sends an email to the candidate with their login information. If they're not using recruiting, if they're using recruiting, then it will be the same information that they used as a candidate, when they were a prospect. So bringing the data in of candidates, like for example, from LinkedIn or from Google Hire, like Google has a app where, like, some companies, they won't use the screening questions within Workday. They will use Google Hire's application. So you have some type of an API call with Google Hire. So your requisition data goes to Google Hire, and then from Google Hire back to Workday. So they might have some screening questions, and candidate evaluation might happen within the Google Hire app instead of the Workday app. Okay. So background check is part of the activity stream, and you could link it out to whichever background check company that you use, and it is a step within the
onboarding
within the onboarding process. So we'll see that as a step also, so that it happens seamlessly within the system. So I just copied this screenshot from the community. Just like this is a dashboard for recruiting. Like if a recruiter or a hiring manager is looking at it. So if you're on the recruiting worklet, you'll see your candidates and total candidates, the number of candidates who are in review stage, the number that are in screening, the number that are in the offer stage, and then the number who have gone through the background check, and then the one candidate that will be in the hire. This is so the CRM is just contact management between the candidate and the hiring team. So this is not the tool that actually does the parsing. The parsing will happen, in a prior step. Yeah, the CRM portion is not the part that does the actual parsing, but the parsing happens, and then the data gets populated in the in the candidate, and the candidate profile is created. So we'll just do a kind of like a functional overview. There's the candidate pipeline, and there's touch points with with LinkedIn profile or posting it on other social media. Then there's sourcing, referral, and candidate management. So internal employees, if you have Workday implemented, the internal employees could also refer other candidates to jobs, and that's internal management. They could also apply to jobs themselves. And now Workday also has interview scheduling and collaboration. You could schedule interviews. I believe it's available with Google Calendars and Outlook Calendar. But you could initiate that scheduling from within Workday. And then there is the offer templates. And then once the offer is signed and approved, and then you go through the onboarding. So just for awareness purposes, everything that it takes to cover it fully. There is a security and tenant setup that needs to happen for Workday Recruiting. And then when the recruiter posts a job, they could also create questions or questionnaire so that candidate fills out response to these questions. That's called questions and questionnaires. And then you tie the question to the job requisition, and there's also Evergreen requisitions. So we'll get into what that definition is in a little bit. Then there's job posting and career sites. And then there is the recruiting sub-processes. We'll get into that. And then the big one is the job application business process. So I want to make sure that I cover, how to configure that business process. And then there's the prospects and candidates. Then the candidate view of their data, the recruiter view, which we call the experience. And then there's recruiting reports. And then there's a referral, like internal referral functionality is there. And then scheduling and Microsoft Outlook integration. For this part, I'm just gonna make you guys aware that there is such a thing, but we're not gonna work on the integration, but I'll show you guys where that setup is. Then we'll look at offer letter. And then there's some security configurations. There is confidential candidate and confidential job requisitions, which are jobs that you post, but you don't want anybody to be aware of them. So you have a hidden URL. So you create a requisition, but it doesn't show up anywhere, but you have the URL, and then you can send it directly to the candidate that you want. So those are called confidential candidates or confidential job recs. There's also the functionality of recruiting agencies that can be set up, and they will have access to the Workday recruiting portal for your company. And then there's reporting and analytics. Let me just go through some more notes on it, a little bit more of the functionality before we actually go into the system. Just a graphic that shows that all of the candidate data goes into this, funnel, and then you have a very large number of candidates, and then they funnel down through each of the recruiting steps, and then they go through the onboarding, and then they become part of the HCM portion. And then somebody from the HCM portion could also apply for an internal job, and then they go through this funnel again.
Okay.
Just a demonstration of that. And then let me just go through some of the definitions. So we spoke of the word onboarding. So what is onboarding? Onboarding is a setup and management, a process that guides workers through onboarding tasks such as updating their contact information, personal information, and submitting electronic I-9 in the United States. And then it also allows you to communicate any information to them and collect any information from them, as well as collect the electronic signature and acknowledgement of that they have received certain documents. You might have the candidates electronically sign and agree to, for example, the non-disclosure document, or every company has like a list of documents that they want to make sure that every new hire, they acknowledge that they have received the handbook. So as part of onboarding, they could acknowledge that they have received it, and then they will electronically sign it. No, the background check happens actually before you do onboarding. Like you can do onboarding. Well, technically you can, but you're not supposed to do onboarding until you pass the until you pass the background check.
Got
so
it.
The background check is not part of onboarding. It should be part of the candidate workflow. So onboarding step. This is a business process that has the I-9 already built in. So as an implementer, you do need to set that up at the implementation time, but I'll show you an existing setup where I-9 step is configured, and I'll show you how and where the I-9 step is. So I'm just going to go into a sales supervisory organization. So I'm going to click on sales supervisory org, and just so that we know where to go to see the roles. So if we click on the roles tab, we see that there is a role for hiring manager. So let me scroll down. There is a role for HR partner. And then there is a recruiter role. So these are the four, some of the roles that are part of the recruitment. There's going to be an HR partner is typically involved, the manager is involved, and there is the recruiting team or a recruiter who's involved. So these are the different roles that will be involved, that will proxy in as. And here, as Logan, I'm gonna go to the recruiting worklet. So right now we're looking at things as a manager. So I'm gonna go to I'll go to the home page, and then from there we'll click on the recruiting worklet. So this is the actionable recruiting worklet. The manager has access to the find candidates reports. So obviously this is a link. You could also type in find candidates here. There's also reminders within Workday. They could also initiate creating the job requisition. They could do Evergreen requisition. They could also invite internal or external candidates to apply to a particular requisition the manager may have. They could create a prospect. Prospect means like they could create a contact, and then the recruiting team will contact them. And then if they do want to be a candidate, then the person, it will no longer be a prospect, it will be a candidate. And then they could view recruiting agency. They could also view their requisitions. They could view them by recruiter. A bunch of other functionality. Any referrals. So this is basically their working workbench. So this is just a report, and this report might be sorted by recruiter.
Okay. Yeah.
This might be sorted by manager. This is just a report. Just the sort might be different. So a recruiter role is assigned to an organization. So if there's a new recruiter, he or she would be assigned to handle like certain organizations. So these are the requisitions. So Workday automatically shows the most recent ones. This little thing right here is a chatbot. This is new functionality. This really it's not particular to recruiting, but I just happened to see this. So this chat functionality is like, it's like instant messenger. You could talk to Workday. A manager could use this and request, you could ask to transfer an employee. And you could talk in natural language, you know. But this Workday Assistant is going to be rolled out to all the Workday customers in about a week time. Right now, it's only available to those who have signed up for early adoption, but I thought it was something pretty neat. You could request time off from here. So it seems like in this instance, it's only enabled for request time off and view pay information, but not for transferring employees. I thought it was it's a pretty neat functionality. I'm going to be implementing this, and I'll write up the steps that need to happen. You need to set up the security for it, and you also get to select what task you could do. But this is a new functionality called Chatbot. It's pretty cool. Just a side note. So back to recruiting. So this is the recruiting worklet, and now let me go to a particular requisition. So requisitions or positions, they will be, you go to the supervisory organization, like anyone, and then you go to the staffing tab. This is where the positions or the requisitions would be. So in this case, it starts with P. So it doesn't have a requisition. This is still a position. But position is, is part of the requisition. So requisition has now been created. So yes, it can be created without it, but if you're using recruiting, it's an option if you want to make it a requirement or not. And the need is basically, so you could send it as a request for approval. So you could send it as a request to approval to the budgetary team or to any other team that needs to approve it, and it's for planning purposes. So before something could become a position, it needs to be approved to be a position. So a company may do approval outside of the system, and then in that case, they'll just create a position. And then I'll go into the setup where that is. Let me log in as the recruiter so I could see the candidates. Okay, so here's a requisition. It doesn't have any active candidates on it, but one of the key things that you need to use requisition for, there's a question like, why do we use position? What's the need of a requisition and not just a position? It's like this field, target hire date is not available on the position. And sometimes you need this for planning purposes. So this is one thing that's not there on the position, the target hire date. Recruiting start date is also not there, but there is, there is the target start date. Like you cannot hire someone before that on the position, but there is no target hire date. There is a target hire date, but then there is also the start date. So the start date is on the position, so you cannot hire them before the start date.
Okay, got it.
But for planning purposes, when you create a requisition, you need to have a target hire date. So finance will know that, hey, this requisition is created for third quarter or fourth quarter, so they know which quarter to budget the cost for that requisition. Right. Yeah, this field will not stop them, but the other field, which is like the start date field, will stop them. So there's some details about the requisition, its name, this format, which org it is in, which position it's associated with, and in a bunch of other fields. If there was a questionnaire associated with it, it's also under the details tab. If it was a replacement, then it shows up here. On a position, the replacement field is not there. So those companies that don't use requisition, they have a challenge in storing where to keep the replacement name. So in that case, you create a custom field on the position, which could be populated to have the replacement name, but it's not directly on the same screen, right? So it's a custom field in Workday is in a separate area, and then you don't see it all on one screen. So if the company is not using requisition, then they don't have this field by default, the requisition, the replacement for. But I was giving you a workaround. In that case, you could create replacement for as a custom field on the position. So you will have it, but it just won't be on the UI. It will be under the additional data. There is the compensation tab, which you could, when you're creating the requisition, you could send the requisition step to either the hiring manager or to finance, and they will populate what is the total base pay for that requisition. So they will see a base range, and then based on that range, they will also enter what would be the appropriate base pay for the hire. And you could route this step to, basically any team that manages the compensation. So it could be a compensation member, it could be a finance, it could be the hiring manager. And then if there was a interview team set up, that is available to set up the interview team for each requisition. And then there's also which cost center is under, any qualifications, like maybe a list of skills that are necessary. So here they have selected 4 competencies, and then, where it would be posted. So this is not, doesn't seem to be posted anywhere, but that information would be on the job postings tab. Let me try to pull some candidates. So here's a requisition that has a lot of candidates. So if we see here that there are different steps. So this is the dynamic business process that someone brought up earlier. So the order of this, the review, the screening, the assessment, the interview, reference check, employment agreement, the offer, the background check, and then the ready for hire. These steps are configured in the dynamic business process, and the order is also configured for the tenant, and we'll see where that is done. So there's a lot of stuff over here, so I'm just going to go slowly so we could see how things look on the functionality side. And then when you scroll down, you could actually see some more detail about the candidates, what step they're in. There's their resume and their current title and the source. And if they had any answers to the questionnaires. It also automatically the system automatically calculates their years of experience. And so you have that here. So you could sort it by, total years of experience or years in current job, or by current company, or by degrees. And then you have the contact tab. And then you could select certain candidates from here, one or multiple, and then you could either move them forward, you could decline them, or you could send them a message, or there's a couple other things. You could add them to a particular pool, or you could send them an invitation, and then you could also copy them to another requisition. So it doesn't have to be just the next step. You could skip any particular step. You have to select which step you want to move them to. We'll see them on one of the when we get there. Some of the labels we can, but not all of the labels. So this is what makes it dynamic, right? Like on the HCM side, you cannot skip steps, but here you could move them to any stage. I could move them to reference check. I could move them. I could skip all these, and I could move them to ready for hire. So we saw how the hiring manager could view candidates, and they could also decline. They could move them forward. We saw some recruiting terminology, like candidate relationship module. So next I think that's a good time for a break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about some of the setups. One decision, for example, a company might need to do is, do they want to enable what's called an activity stream? Activity stream is like you have a particular candidate, and then you want to make some notes about that candidate, and then you want to share those notes with the hiring manager. Just like on Facebook, there's the activity stream of everything that you do on Facebook. There's also an activity stream, for each candidate or prospect. So to show you an example of that, I pulled up the report called Find Candidates, and then this is a delivered report, and then you could filter on any of these factors. So I filtered on prospect, and these are all the prospects here. So here's the prospect's profile, and if we go to the overview, at the bottom is activity stream. So anything that you type here, if you want to tag someone's name so that they get alerted, you put an @ symbol, and then you could tag them. So at Logan, hey, check out this candidate. And then that person could respond back, and then you could basically have a discussion about this candidate or prospect. So this is called an activity stream, and some companies may have this, some companies may not, but this is one of the things that you need to set up in the tenant. So let me log in as, not as a recruiter, but someone who's got more access than the recruiter. In order to actually the first thing that you need to do to enable recruiting, you actually have to turn that functional area on. So you go to maintain functional task, or maintain functional areas, actually. And this will give you a list of all the Workday areas. And there's an enabled column. So you would find a recruiting and then enable it first. So in this tenant, everything that's checked, these are stuff that's already been enabled in here. So there's HCM advanced comp, financials, benefits is enabled. Obviously we could filter on it, but I'm just showing you guys everything that's enabled. So here's onboarding. It's kind of like a little separate thing, because you could have onboarding without recruiting. And then here's recruiting, and recruiting has been enabled. So that's task number 1. And then there's a couple other items that are under the edit tenant setup. you guys notice something? There's one search functionality in Workday that's lacking. So when you type in the first few letters or words, you think this is the full list, but that is not true. It's only the first 3, 6, 7, what is it? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's only the first 7 things that pop up. But if you don't know any better, you think, oh, this is all there is. But there's more. And unfortunately, this has been like a known issue for a long time and it's still not fixed. I think now with the new release, it does look at things that you have done most recently, and then it will show those. Like I was looking for edit tenant system, and it's not there. So this has all of the tenant system related decisions, like the welcome message, any notes. So we're going to scroll down to, this is where the logo is maintained. But for our purposes, we need to go down to activity streams. And we could search, we could do a Control F, but I'll just scroll down just so we see everything else that's here. So here, activity stream settings, selected objects for activity stream. So things that are selected here, these profiles will have that activity stream enabled. So remember on that report, I selected prospect. And the reason prospect had the activity stream was because here, prospect was selected. So if I X out the prospect, then the prospect will no longer have the activity stream. And then now we're going to go to edit tenant HCM. Here is the sequence that we're going to use for the ID of the candidate and the ID of the pre-hire and the employee ID. So these are basically the basic sequence generators. Here we just say do it sequentially starting from whatever particular number that's been defined. And sequence ID for new positions. And for HCM type, there is some defaults like change job default headcount option, like during the job change process. There's multiple options, and which one do you want to default? So, I plan to backfill this headcount is the defaulted one. And the one that we're interested in is this one. Allow override of restrictions on staffing events. So that means if you create a position or a requisition on that position and it's for San Francisco, but now you find someone in a remote location in, like, say for example in remote Ohio, if you don't have this selected, then you cannot hire them in Chicago if your requisition is in San Francisco. So in order to have that kind of flexibility, you must have this selected, allow override of restrictions on staffing events. Okay, so that's one decision point, and the company may have already made this decision, but they want to change this decision. Now, like, they're getting really tight, they don't want to give hiring managers the flexibility. They have to hire wherever it's approved. So you would uncheck this.
Okay.
And there's one more part over here. I need to go to the job requisition section, which is down below. Okay, so here under job recs, it says enable job requisitions for position management. And there's three choices. It says require job requisitions for all position management staffing events. So that means whenever you create a position, you have created job requisition, so job rec is required as the first step, or you enable it, but you don't require it. So that means if you could create a position, but based on certain rules or business decisions, you can create a job requisition, or you can select none of the above. But if you're using recruiting, you should have one of these selected. I mean, obviously you could get away with not having it selected, but I think it's meant to have at least one of these selected. We have this other choice here, this one, enable job requisition for job management. So if they're using job management staffing model, then this should be selected. And if you want to enable primary and secondary questionnaire removal or replacement on Evergreen and job requisitions. So first one says you must always have a requisition. This one says you can have it sometimes, but if you select this, neither one of these rules apply. But if you do have the job requisition business process, it's an actual BP. It's called a BP : job requisition. Okay. If you have that enabled, then even if you don't have these two selected, you could still create a requisition. Okay. But you're not forcing that decision for every position. If I select this one, it means you will still have to create the position. Like the position has to be created if you're using position management staffing model. So you cannot, there's no exception. So if you're using position management, you don't have a choice. The position has to be created. But if you select this second one, you're saying that sometimes you could create a job requisition and sometimes you will not. And you could put on some conditional rules that, like, if the location is in United States, then we want to create a requisition. If it's in Canada, then we don't need a requisition. So that's what the second choice would be. Well, they're not exactly the same. This one is conditional job requisition creation, and this one says you don't have to create it at all. Okay. But you could still create it if you have that business process enabled. It really depends on the company. If they want to tightly control their budget, then they will require a job requisition. Okay. If they don't want to tightly require it, then they should not be using position management. They should be using job management. Right. If they're doing a lot of hiring, approving stuff, everything's already approved, and you want to do quick hiring, quick decision making, and quick data entry, then you should not use position management. You should use job management. And that means you just create the job and then you can hire directly against that job without having to worry about any of the position data. So I'm going to just take a note on the previous configuration. Like, I'm going to try to find out why in this instance neither radio button was selected for creating a requisition when using position management. Because ideally, when you're using recruiting, you should have at least one of those radio buttons selected. So I'm just take a note on that to look into that. So here, enable recruiting job areas. This means when you think of job area, think of job family. So job family means like you have finance jobs, you have engineering jobs, you have sales jobs. And so if you want to submit a resume based on the job family instead of a requisition. Like you want to say, hey, this is a resume for any job in the sales area. So then this must be selected. So job areas equal job family. And if you want to allow people to submit against that job family, then this must be selected. If you don't have this selected, then they have to submit the resume against a requisition or a general submission rather than against a particular job area. So this is a good idea to have it selected based on the company decision. And if you want to enable referrals, this must be selected. I'll get a better definition of what it means by referral ownership level tomorrow. And there was one more item in here. Enable automatic candidate merging. So it's a good idea to have this selected. That means if you have a candidate who applied like 3 months ago, they applied, and they're still in the system as a candidate. Now they applied again, but they used a different email ID, but it's the same person. So the system will detect based on parameters, or the recruiter will recognize that this is the same person, and then they could merge those two profiles, and then you could select which profile data or which data within the profile between those two profiles you want to keep. Interview schedule, calendar integration, so you could integrate with Microsoft Outlook or Google Calendar. And then if you have set aside certain location types, such as cubes for interview scheduling, then they will show up, like if you had cubicles. And there was something down here. Basically the links, if you have your privacy policy or text link, a bunch of other things. Time to fill. This is, you need to tell the system how are you going to, or how does the company, they want to calculate time to fill, like how long did it take to fill this requisition, right? So this does change over time. Like time to fill is a metric that shows how quickly a recruiter was able to hire against that rec. So do you want that to be based on the time that the requisition was approved to the time that it was filled? Or do you want that to be from the time that the requisition was initiated to the time that you found the candidate? So every company will have a different definition. So this gives you the ability to set up how the company wants to define time to fill. Like if you look at the other choices, correct. So, do you want to calculate based on when it was approved, or do you want to do it based on when it was posted?
Not posting it, got it.
So every company is going to have a different decision. So this is where you could implement that decision, or if they want to change their decision, this is where you go to change it. This is in the reports. There's a report that shows what was the average time to fill for within that department. Not an audit trail, but there is a metric that the management wants to know, like, hey, how fast are we filling the requisitions? Is it taking 30 days or 90 days? The job application stage order. So for that job application BP, it has the different steps. So here, the review stage must be the first one, and the ready for hire must be the last one. But within that, you could change the order of the different stages that the candidate will go through. Just a couple of quick things before we call it a day. You guys are familiar with constrained roles and unconstrained roles, right? Or yes. Some of you guys might be.
Yeah.
So in Workday for recruiting, you need to be aware that there is two types of recruiter roles. Let me look up. So here's recruiter and then recruiter unconstrained. So if you want your recruiter to have access to only the organization to which the recruiter is assigned, then you will give them, you have this group, but that doesn't make sense, right? Because the candidate might be in an adjacent organization, and if you don't have unconstrained group, then the recruiter will not have access to that candidate. It depends where the candidate has applied. Candidate has applied to the requisition that the recruiter owns, or the candidate is in a, like, it might be a sales engineer requisition. You might think, oh, this guy's a great sales engineer, but he's also a great engineer. So a recruiter that's assigned to engineering won't have access to the sales engineer requisitions. So in that case, you want to make sure that you're using the recruiter unconstrained groups as part of your role assignment. Just familiarize yourself with some of the reports in the system. So there's the find candidates. You could just type in the name of this report in the search bar. Find candidate, candidate pipeline, source effectiveness, find open jobs, refer a candidate, view candidates, compare interview feedback. And tomorrow we'll start the, like what is an Evergreen requisition, how do you create a questionnaire and job recs. So we'll cover that tomorrow. I mean, there's many more reports, but these are the ones that I just came across for right now. See if the answer, yeah, there's one about which report to use. So this is a different topic for everybody else. Someone posted a question about which report to use for compensation details. And typically, we may have to build our own report. But there is a report that exists in the system already. It's called compensation details. Compensation details. There's worker compensation details, and then I made a copy of one. I put RM compensation details. You put in the supervisory organization's leader. And the reason I ran this report is I wanted to identify a small group of employees who were on a particular compensation plan, so that when I roll out the compensation process, I know if it's accurate or not. So this report gives you access to their bonus plan assignment, their compensation grade, and a couple of other items, their rating and comp ratio and any salary increase. And if you want to see the business object that this report uses, so it's based on the all active workers, workers for HCM reporting. And so here it is. It's all on the worker object. And then we have the one-time payment plan as well. So the reason I needed this report, right? I wanted to understand which plan, like I rolled out a particular bonus plan, right? I want to make sure that the plan has been rolled out to them. So there were multiple ways I could get that data, but this is also one way. Like I ran this report, and let me run it again, and I'll show you where I wanted to make sure that everybody in this list had that plan I was looking for. And even if that was not the question was just you have to get to know your population, right? You have, like, if you're supporting Workday, you should know all the attributes of the compensation elements. You basically get to know your data, like whatever that data is, whether you're working with people data or expense reports. Run a report of all the expense reports, what different types there are, so you're familiar with all the different attributes of whatever you're working on. So here you see what plan these employees are on, so that the plan that we created is also listed here. And then I got to see, hey, this is the job family we're using, this is a job profile. So I could use this data in whatever, I just wanted to know if we're actually using job families, or what was the values available for job families in this system. So because bonus plan could be launched against any type of organization, you could launch it on just for a particular cost center, or you could launch it based on a supervisory org. So that step allows you to select which type of organization that you want to roll out the plan to. So on that page, you select supervisory org, and then which, who's going to be the top manager to which you're going to roll out this plan to. But it is similar, but that screen is only shows up if you're doing bonus, then that screen shows up where you select which type of org you're going to select. And then make sure you download I believe it's like a 25 or 27 page PDF as well on the notes on Advanced Comp. Yeah, so you definitely have to worry about that, because that is a configuration that you're going to allow managers to go over budget, or you're not going to allow them to go over budget. So if you select that you're not going to allow them to go over budget, and then if they need to go over budget even by $1, then they cannot proceed, right? The system will give them an error like, you have to reduce your budget. So my suggestion would be, and this is what I have done, is within the system, I have always pushed the management. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the management decision, but I always push them to say, do allow them to go over budget, because you always have some kind of exception case, and you allow the system to allow them to go over budget. But during your training, your offline training to the users or the managers, you tell them that you cannot go over budget, and that way you could accommodate any exception cases. So there is a setting at the time of launch where that choice is. And then your first question about when do we audit, or at what point do we audit? So once we initiate the merit process, at the last step, it will tell you what the total budget is. And not only it tells you the total budget, it tells you the budget for all of the top level orgs. And then you want to get a sign off that this is the true budget, and the comp admin will manually calculate what that budget should be. And then you can match it up with the budget that you see within Workday. And that way you could tell if maybe there were some proration rules that are not set up yet in Workday. Maybe in the manual calculation, they are excluding any particular time that the person was on medical leave, but leave is not set up as a proration within Workday. So it will help you discover those kind of discrepancies. But you should do that like at least at the minimum, like 10 days before you actually have to launch in real life, because you will find some discrepancy, you'll have to fix it, and then you have to audit again. So you definitely need some few days to do that testing. I was referring to downloading the data that's in the grid. So as the, when you launch the compensation process to the managers see that grid, right, with like employee name, this is their target budget, this is their current salary, this is what's proposed new salary. So I was referring that some companies would like to do analysis on that data before you close that process. So in that case, you need a report like, you need to be able to download that data, whatever's in that grid, you need to be able to download that. And that is a custom report. If I did not share how the screenshots of that, I'll take some screenshots right now and just post them, so you know like which business object to select.
All right, let's test your knowledge. Here's a question for you. Which of these is not a standard candidate status in Workday Recruiting? Option A, prospect. Option B, applicant. Option C, finalist. Option D, rejected. Take a moment to think, and when you're ready, choose the correct option. Remember, each choice holds a key to unlocking the answer. Good luck! Type the correct answer in the comment section. Hello everyone! I'm excited to tell you about ZaranTech's premier training program for Workday recruiting. As more companies adopt Workday for their HR needs, talent acquisition teams must leverage the platform's robust recruiting features. Over the past 3 years, ZaranTech has helped hundreds of recruiting professionals skill up on Workday recruiting through instructor-led and self-paced courses. Many alumni rave about finally grasping Workday's applicant tracking, job requisition creation, interview scheduling, and offer management capabilities after taking the training. In just 4 weeks with ZaranTech, you'll learn end-to-end recruiting workflows in Workday, including configuring job profiles, posting openings, moving candidates through hiring stages, and producing insightful reports. This can help you or your team work more efficiently, demonstrate value to hiring managers, and earn promotions. Multiple global enterprises have chosen ZaranTech's Workday recruiting training for upskilling their talent acquisition staff. As more companies transition to Workday, now is the perfect time to enroll and gain an advantage. Visit ZaranTech's website below for full details on the training curriculum and formats. This is a worthwhile investment as you advance your Workday recruiting expertise.
All right, so for today, we're just going to continue on the recruiting part. It's going to be the recruiting third session. And since recruiting's got a bunch of parts, I just want to start out by saying that if we think about the overall recruiting process, right, there is something called a job requisition. So what is a job requisition? This is the basically job and position details that are sent for approval and then posted online, internally or externally. So that is what a job rec is. So someone has to create that job rec, and the process for creating the job rec is defined in the BP job rec, as far as who will do what within that process. So it's typically going to be the manager or the recruiter. And so that's going to be part of the BP job rec. So once it is created and approved and then is posted, so posted online, it could mean is posted internally and externally. So posted internally / externally. So this means that when a company is using Workday system, Workday gives them a web page where they could post their jobs, and there's multiple web pages, and those are called career sites. So I was saying that the job has to be posted internally and externally on what is called career sites. Career sites are basically websites that come with Workday Recruiting, and they could be set up for internal employees only, and then there's sites that could be set up for external applicants as well as for agencies. So at a high level, job rec is created and is posted internally / externally on those career sites, and then obviously candidate has to apply. Okay, so once the candidate applies, what is the process for that, right? So the process for the candidate applying and where it goes after that, that's defined in the BP job application. So when the candidate applies, and then there is the back on the recruiter side, there is the recruiter hub. This is where recruiters, you can call it a dashboard that has all of their information. So recruiters dashboard with all of the recruiting data. And I showed you guys how to set this up last time with all the recruiting data. So there's the recruiter hub, and then there is the review process. And could also be offer / background check. And there's a couple other steps in there. So this is the recruitment steps. And if the candidate passes all these steps, then there is going to be, offer gets generated. So there is a template for that. And then the offer is sent to the candidate, and the candidate accepts or rejects, and then the recruiter takes action on moving the candidate to the higher phase. So here, recruiter moves candidate, recruiter or manager moves candidate to higher step. So in essence, basically this is the overall, the key things that happen within the recruiting module, right? And then there's a lot of the integrations that need to happen, or when we say background check, that data needs to be sent to the background vendor through the system if they have that set up. So overall, that's the process. And on my Excel sheet last time, I gave you guys screenshots on how to create the job requisition. I'm not sure if anyone had a chance to create it, but we will go through it in the system as well. So let me log into our server. Did anyone get a chance to work on the one small question that I posted on the assignment board, as far as who could move the who could post the jobs? Okay, so we'll go ahead and create a requisition. We go in as login. Can someone tell me the name of the requisition business process that we need that controls the requisition flow when create? So if we see this, we see the initiation step, and then the creation step is for the HR partner, and then it goes to the recruiter for the compensation piece, and then there's the role assignment, and then there's the job posting, right? You have to post the job, and currently job posting is for the HR partner and the recruiter. And the question that I posted on the assignment was, what if the request is that going forward, we also want the HR administrator to be able to post a job. So what step do you have to modify, and how will you modify that? If we look at this business process, right, we see step E, which is post a job.
Right.
And HR partner and the recruiter could do that currently.
Right.
Now they want to change their process. Now they want to say the HR admin, they should be able to do that.
Okay.
In addition to the HR partner and recruiter.
Okay.
So how would you modify this business process in order to do that? We need to make sure that that group is here as part of the security policy as well. So this is step one, and then step two would be edit that. So let's just check who's under create, just so that they have access to the template. I will put them in all of the review steps and all of the create steps, so that you have the flexibility of, because then you could control it at the step level on the other side. So best practice is to take that group and put them in all of these, in case you need to, you're not just doing it for the action or the review. So you have to make sure that group is here and under view all as well. And then we do the edit definition like you mentioned. And then whatever groups that are enabled, they would show up over here. So I'm not going to add that person because I don't want to mess up the tenant, but that's where you would add that. So there's two things involved, right? From here, we make sure that the the security policy, the business process policy. That group is there under action or approve or view, depending on where you need them to be. And then we come to business process policy and edit the actual row from here. So this is a group for each of these steps. So in that case, we wanted to add one more group here that could post a job. So we edit the business process and add them here. Okay, so now let's go to a particular organization like Steve Morgan's, and let's see if there's any existing recs. If it's not in the business process policy, you will not be able to add it in the definition.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we add it to the policy and then we activate the security policy, business process policy. Okay, next thing I wanted to show you guys was Steve Morgan's Global Monitoring Service. Okay, so I'm trying to create job requisition, right? And I'm here as the manager, but I cannot pull up any supervisory org. I'm gonna see who could initiate that. So initiator could be anybody, and like all of the HR partners, recruiter, and then the create position part goes to the HR partner. So we want to check is who's in the HR partner role and who's in the recruiter role for Logan's organization. So we come to the organization, the supervisory org, and then we come to roles. And I want to see who the recruiter is. So James Moore is a recruiter. Let me try proxy as James Moore. So I had actually created a requisition as James Moore, and I applied to it as an external candidate, and I put it in offer stage. But I want to do it from the beginning, and for some reason it's not allowing me to do that right now. Seems like it's not recognizing that I'm logged in as the recruiter or the HR business partner. Because when I look at the, if you look at my left-hand side at the bottom, here, I see that I'm logged in as James Moore, the HR person. But if I click here, it has me as Charlie Smith, who is not the HR person. So I don't know why it's showing up twice, but I'm having some technical difficulty here. So let me come to this one. No, let me give you guys a 10-minute break while I figure this out, and then I'll check back in 10 minutes, see what's going on. I
Okay.
apologize about that. Can someone else try to log into the server and then proxy in as James Moore and see if they could get anything to pop up in any of these two fields? Did you guys have the instructions on how to log into the training server? Do you guys see this screen that says QA preview? So what I did was, instead of using our training server, I logged into the GMS on the community. So it should work from there, but then, I don't know what kind of setup they have there, but let's see how far we could get. So in this step, I'm going to log, the goal is to create a job requisition as a manager or as a recruiter. So the task name is just create job rec. So here, since I'm logged in as Logan, her organization is Human Resources. So I'm going to type that in. If it's failed, you still could be able, you could copy it. So I'm going to create a new one. So we just gave it the number of openings, and then we'll enter the job information. The only problem with creating it on here is, while we could create the requisition, but we cannot apply to it as an external candidate. Whereas on our own training server, we could create it and then we could also apply to it. But at least we'll make some progress on this one. in this section, questionnaire, if there was a question created, and then questions were tied to a questionnaire, we could select these to show up on the internal or the external site. So in this case, they seem to have more than one, and then you could just call them whatever you want. But in real life, companies will have one internal site, one external site, and they may have one agency, or they may have a separate one for contractors. So whatever information that we enter here will show up on the job description when the job gets posted. So here is global monitoring. This information is whatever was the hiring manager's cost center. This was the hiring manager's cost center, so that's why it defaults here. And then we give it a compensation amount. So here's the bonus plan, stock plan, merit plan. Yeah, it's actually just very similar. But there's just a few different fields. There's a couple of additional fields on the requisition that are not on the position. So since we cannot proxy in as different folks in the GMS tenant in this one, I'm gonna try to just log in as Joy Banks and go to her inbox. And here's the HR staffing coordinator position that we initiated, and now it came to her for approval. Okay. So now I'm back to her to log in. So let me log back to her. So still logged in as Joy. So what I'm sharing on the screen is the job application template, and whatever's listed here, like these are the sections that show up on the external career site. So if we remove any fields or we want to add fields, we would need to edit this template. And we could also change, instead of putting like certification, we could call it skills or competencies. After we submitted it, right, now is the posted job step came, and this is where you could select external career site, and then also as internal site. So it takes the job posting description, and this information is coming from a template, like it's fun to work in a company, and I'll show you where to change that. And then remember, I entered the sample job description in the job description field, so that's what shows up over here. And then by default, there's also a video that's been added to this. So the template for posting is under the Career Center. So let me go ahead and submit this. So in real life, you have the ability to create a career site where you could post the internal or external, job postings. And there will be 3 sections. There will be the job listing page, job details page, and the application form. And the task name, as I've given you here, you could do create, edit, or delete career site. And then below is just the example that I had created before in our training server. It's just a way for the candidate to apply to that job. So now I'm gonna say edit career site, because that site that is gonna post it, right? For example, we have to make some verbiage changes to it. You could select the name it's going to have, the languages it could translate into, if it's published or not, like an active site, and then this will be the URL. I found previously from the community GMS, you cannot access the site unless you have a special username and password. And any of the terms or text that you need, based on certain criteria, there will be under these sections. So under job details is the About Us section. So all of this information is entered at the time of implementation, but if you need to change it, like you come over here to change it, like if you need to change this information. No, it's within Workday, so the external site and the internal site, these are pages within the Workday system, but they're just designed to look like a web page where the jobs are posted. So there's no, in order to post to this external site, there is no integration. This is part of Workday. And when you create a brand new one, it will give you a brand new URL, and then it will tell you like, okay, this is the URL to access that. You could change that, like the About Us text, which shows up for the company on the, we saw on the right-hand side, and then